Hello class, my name is Saria, and this week we're going to be covering Chapter 13, Vocabulary and Reading Comprehension, taken from the book Reading in a Second Language, Moving from Theory to Practice by William Grabe. And we will also be covering 4 teaching strategies from the ELL Teacher's Toolbox. We have quite a bit of information in this week's lesson, so let's get started. The chapter begins with discussing how there have been a lot of research conducted in regards to learning and teaching vocabulary. In view of this, there are many questions that one may ask. And these questions are listed here, and we will go through them one by one to answer as I work through the lesson. Let's talk about reading vocabulary relationship. This quote by Dr. Seuss talks about the more that you read, the more things you know, the more that you learn, the more places you'll go. Pretty much it goes hand in hand with this because researchers have found that there's correlations between vocabulary and reading. So the more one reads, the better their vocabulary is. The more vocabulary they get, the better they will increase in their reading comprehension. Since vocabulary and reading are tied hand in hand, what exactly does it mean to know a word? Well, the surveys that were conducted show that there's more than one way to know a word. As a matter of fact, the chapter lists 9 components of word knowledge, and you will see they're listed here: orthography, morphology, parts of speech, pronunciation, meanings, collocations, specific uses, and register. So learning a word doesn't mean that we know everything about that word immediately. There's really a lot involved. It takes time and mental lexical entries. As we go about living our lives, we pretty much learn more and more. Can any of you tell me how many words are in the English language? Well, the article brought out that there are about 110,000 words in common use. And what Educational Corpora estimates that number being between 100,000 and 500,000. And the numbers go on, and it can be mind-boggling. Math is not my thing, and there, to me, it's just a whole lot of numbers. Anyhow, Grabe stated in this chapter that it is reasonable to assume a general vocabulary of well over 100,000 words in active use in English. And it mentions that the compound forms, idioms, and common names would actually increase that total number immensely if it was included. With so many words, how many English words do you know? Going along, the study conducted and brought out that there were upwards of 88,000 word families encountered by L1 students. And these words include base word forms, inflectional forms, and transparent, closely related derivative forms. And this would be in text during the course of their primary and secondary schooling, so that an L1 educated adult is said to have about 40,000 words. Now let's talk about L2 learners. How many words should an L2 learner know? After all the number compilations, percentages, it all boils down to this. If an L2 reader knows a minimum of 10,000 words, they have a reasonable chance to understand an academic text, even though they're not able to read that text fluently. So, how many words can they learn from reading context? For an L2 student to know 10,000 words, they need a lot of exposure to what is written so that they can learn the words from context. There's a slight problem. Well, actually, there's two problems. The first is the issue of how incidental word learning from extensive exposure to text leads to large vocabulary over time. And the second is the issue of a student's learning specifically by guessing words from context. Okay, let's look at this a little bit further. When they learn words incidentally from context, as we discussed previously, there's a difference between L1 and L2 learning. With the L1 learning, the teachers have estimated that students can learn between 1,000 and 5,000 words a year. Well, that's not possible for L2 learners, especially when they're in regular classroom setting. In order for them to learn 2,000 words a year, they would have to learn about 50 words a week in 40 weeks time, and they would have to be in an intensive ESL class where they'll be taking 20 or more hours of instruction per week, and we know that that does not happen. We're talking about context where the goal of reading is to comprehend what they're reading. It is not the goal to teach new words. So it's really complicated. And there's a lot involved. One would have to do extensive reading. And the chapter made a really good point when it said that learning the vocabulary required to become a good reader does not mean making a choice between direct vocabulary instruction and extensive exposure to words through reading. Both paths to vocabulary learning are needed, and they can support each other in complementary ways. Now let's talk about guessing words from context. Okay, although there are some benefits from guessing words in context, the chapter concluded that guessing from context is a strategic way to read through difficult texts, but it's not a very efficient way to learn new words as parts of an explicit vocabulary instruction. So should vocabulary be taught directly? Well, there are 7 points in teaching vocabulary directly that could promote vocabulary learning. They are engaging and semantic mapping and word mapping, developing concept of definition maps, attending to glosses in text, learning key concept words before reading, and experiencing multiple exposures to words. So what words should be taught and learned? In regards to the context of learning, L1 to L2 is very different. So the chapter talks about frequent words being taught whenever the opportunity arises and it's reasonable to do so. And also how it would be great if and when we're able to successfully teach students to boost the most frequent 8,000 words. How many words can be taught? Well, in an ideal situation, ESL students would receive 12 to 20 hours a week of language instruction, which would allow them to learn 2,000 words per year, broken down to 50 hours a week in a 40-week school year. And if there was more ESL instruction, one could learn well over 2,000 words per year. It's noted that students that have learned more than 2,000 of the most frequent words. Those are the ones that have developed word learning strategies that help them to be more efficient in learning new words because they already know more words. For example, the word mile and tippet are easy to learn for someone who already knows the words hot, cold, freezing, warm, or cool. Okay, so now implications for instruction. Vocabulary words need to be developed from a combination of direct vocabulary instruction, vocabulary learning strategies, extensive reading, and word learning from context. Students need to have a heightened awareness of new words and motivation to use and collect words. And the instruction needs to provide opportunities for practice using the words and multiple encounters with the words use over time. There has to be a continual effort to recycle words into new lessons. Here we have a list on this slide and the next slide of a total of 17 ways that we can help our English learners learn new vocabulary. Graves sums up this chapter by telling us that a coherent approach to direct vocabulary learning must combine some understanding of how students are likely to learn words as a result of direct instruction, a systematic approach to appropriate word selection, many opportunities for them to practice and use the words being learned, and a vocabulary-rich environment in the classroom. We're told that students also need to develop effective, independent word learning strategies, become metacognitively aware of the power of words, and be strongly motivated to learn words, both through instruction and independently. And this will have them reach the end goal, which would be to ensure that the key words are overlearned, that large numbers of related words are learned, and that the students appreciate the power of words and that they become lifelong collectors of words. In the EL Teacher's Toolbox, we have the first strategy 10, reading comprehension. With reading comprehension, we know that students that are actively engaged in their learning have better reading outcomes than passive learners. So there's various strategies that help them to become aware of their thinking processes and can build on their reading comprehension, such as read aloud and think aloud, whole class readings, and closed readings. And then with strategy 11, inductive learning, well, this is good because studies have shown that if we are actively involved in its creation or involved in doing something, we are going to value it more, and the students can learn better if they are involved in their learning. And inductive learning helps that, such as we have here, there's an example of a picture word inductive model. And then there's also phonics and picture data sets and concept attainment, different strategies and activities that we can do with our students. Strategy 11, Concept Attainment Plus, is pretty neat because it's a strategy that builds on the popular concept attainment to inductive learning concept, which it kind of ties in with strategy 11. And with this, concept attainment can be very effective in helping the students gain a grasp of key concepts. Plus, it can challenge them to apply that understanding to a broader context. And here we have illustrated here an example of a lesson. And then finally, strategy 23. It talks about learning games for reading and writing. And this strategy 23 lists a lot of different games that we can do with our students to help them with their reading and writing. I know everybody loves games. I love games. So it's a great learning, fun way for the students to learn vocabulary and reading and writing. Thank you so much for all of your time and attention, and I will see you in the discussion board this week. I look forward to all your feedbacks and comments on this week's discussion questions.